Captioning of this program is brought to you in part by BNN, Business News Network.
Well, competition is heating up in the telecom industry, mostly from the cable providers, and they're muscling into that whole phone territory, managing to rake in some profits. For more on the telcos, we're joined by, and all the other things associated to it, John Arnold is here. He's a telecom consultant with J. Arnold and Associates. John, great to see you again.
Same, Pat. Nice to see you.
TELUS, and Rogers for that matter, coming out with numbers. In TELUS's case, maybe not as impressive, because the wireless area was seen as a big growth area. They are still adding a lot of subscribers, though, right?
Oh, sure are. Sure are. You know, wireless penetration in Canada is not what it is in the U.S., and it does lag a number of the G7 or G8 countries out there. It's still pretty decent, but there's still a lot of upside to go. So the market is far from saturated, so wireless will continue to be a good growth story for all the major players. Of course, we have 3 major players in the market. So, but TELUS, on the other hand, is technically a regional player, but nationally, yes, the wireless story is still strong for them.
What happened to TELUS? Are their margins getting squeezed a little bit?
Well, sure. There obviously is competition, and when you look at the whole wireless space, you can't overlook the fact that Rogers really has the hot hand because they're on the GSM network. And what we're starting to see in the marketplace is increasing demand for, in the business market especially, for global travel, the need to have global access across all countries and markets, and Rogers can provide that because GSM is pretty much the dominant global standard.
Certainly in Europe that's the case. Is that the case in Asia?
It is there too, sure. CDMA is the standard that Bell and TELUS both use. It's a very good standard, but geographically its strength is really North America. So subscribers to those plans are at a bit of a disadvantage if you are a globetrotter type. And that's really where Rogers has done well. And that in itself could very well account for some of the slowdown in what TELUS has seen, I think, as more and more people look to go to the GSM standard. And another point which can't be overlooked is the fact that the Rogers network can support higher speeds. And we're starting to move into a market now where mobility is not just about voice. Now we're starting to see video, movie clips, TV shows, all of that stuff that's happening and is going to be continuing to grow. We're just at the very beginning of that wave, and certainly the mobile video space has a lot of upside to go. And again, the GSM network can support the higher speeds, and conversely can support the handsets that can operate at those higher speeds to get into the mobile data market. It's very, very early days yet, but again, Bell and TELUS are at a bit of a handicap when it comes to comparing today what they can do against Rogers.
Yeah, but the proviso in all this is the rest of the world is ahead of us. It's ahead of us in terms of technology. It's ahead of us in terms of saturation. Why do you think saturation is an issue here in Canada? Is it pricing?
Well, in the wireless market, it's an issue of pricing, and backing up, it's really an issue of the competitive environment. We really have 3 major players now. We used to have 4, of course, but both GSM players are under one roof, Microcell and Rogers, and then there's Bell and TELUS. But interestingly, you know, we do have regional players here. We do have Saskatchewan and Manitoba, who both operate wireless services in their local markets, and there's a bit of a wild card there, especially with MTS, because they do have national coverage in the business market, that when the wireless spectrum auction comes up next year, MTS has some possibilities here to become another national carrier. The issue there is that the regulatory bodies will say that we do not have a competitive enough environment, therefore pricing is artificially high, consumers aren't getting the best value, and certainly when you look even just to the United States, but also abroad, the kind of impact wireless has on everyday life it's far more pervasive there than it is here, simply because the cost of using wireless is so affordable, and in fact better than some of the installed wireline services that's what people live on.
Yeah.
But in Canada, it's not really the case.
Yeah, good point. But with the new spectrum coming on board in the auction that happens next year, do you think we could get American or international players coming into this marketplace?
You know, as direct owners, probably not. We certainly have foreign ownership restriction issues that were there for good reason, for Canadian sovereignty and all that. But still, there is a lot of demand from players like MTS who would like to see those restrictions relaxed or even eliminated, because the marketplace here does not have sufficient capital to really bring a 4th player to life. Now, whether the market can truly support a 4th national player remains to be seen. You know, Microcell couldn't make it as a 4th, and now they're part of Rogers. But on the other hand, you know, we have a limited market. We have 30 million people roughly getting up to 20 million, I think, in subscribers. A lot of people, but it's still not a huge market when you look at global standards. You know, the U.S. is rapidly becoming a 3 or 4 carrier market for the majority of the players.
Never mind. MTS is an interesting story. I guess they could be the front money for American money that came up to the wireless spectrum, which would be interesting in itself. But when you're looking at the quarterly numbers, for instance, they came out and they were complaining about VoIP. Is VoIP making big penetration in this country?
Well, in certain ways it is. You know, VoIP, by the way, we're crossing lines here because the wireless story is a whole other thing where VoIP hasn't really made its presence felt for good reasons if you're a carrier. But VoIP in the consumer market is having some success here, but not the kind of penetration you see in the U.S. It's moving along at a nice clip, though, mainly because of the cable companies. You know, the independents, the Vonages and Primuses of the world here don't drive the market the way they do in the U.S.
Why is that?
Well, I think mainly I think the Canadian market has been a little more spoiled compared to the American market in terms of traditionally having very good quality service, well-priced service, and well-supervised service in the terms of having good regulatory strength behind it. So we haven't had a lot to complain about. And also the cable cos were late coming into the game, as they were in the U.S. too, but once they've come in, they've made VoIP more of an important product to have in your portfolio when you start talking about triple play and bundles, because that seems to be the big weapon for all the big players to compete now. And VoIP has to be part of that bundle, at least telephony. They're not calling it VoIP, by the way. You know, they call it digital phone, home phone. VoIP is kind of a word they want to avoid because it sounds too techy, and there's a whole marketing side to that. So, but all of the major players with the bundles, certainly voice is a big part, wireline voice is a big part of it. And what we're going to see next year, I think, is wireless VoIP starting to become more interesting.
Oh, okay.
And that's a whole other
I can look forward to that. I can also look forward to the, I was in an Apple store yesterday and somebody came in and asked about the iPhone. It's not here in Canada yet.
Well, legally it's not here in Canada. That's right. If you're clever like my kids and can unlock the phone, there are ways you can use it. But you know, as good as Rogers' growth story is with wireless, we haven't even brought the iPhone to Canada yet. So, and that's again something that they have rights on.
That's only GSM. The iPhone is only GSM.
That's correct. So it could, because the iPhone is really a global phone. Apple's strategy is to make this a global product, and to do that, it's got to be on GSM. So again, Bell and Telus will not be able to come to market with an iPhone unless Apple sort of loosens up its purse strings, and so to speak, on the technical side, and says, hey, we'll let it run on all networks. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. They've got a good story here on the GSM front. So that, in fact, will be more good news for Rogers, because everyone wants the iPhone. It's the hot product right now, and the demand just keeps getting more and more pent up. And at some point, obviously, it's going to come to Canada.
We could talk about phones forever, John. Thanks very much for joining us.
Sure, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
John Arnold is telecom consultant at J. Arnold and Associates. How are the American job numbers playing out in the markets today? Linda Nazareth next.